So now that we can pull out a single item of code here, right, the CSL, again we can make this whatever we want. If we wanted to go and pull a different one for us, you can see that it pulls out whatever information we're getting. Well, now let's say that we want to grab all of the data here within this table and pump it out as a JSON file for output somewhere. This is where you would now need to question how it is that you're actually going to structure your data. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this as a single item here, and we want to have effectively what we have previously with our CSL option, where we have all of this stuff here. Well, what we would want to do above it is that we would want to have a JSON key value pair that looks a little bit like this, if we can structure this one. So what this will look like is we see, hey, we've got this top identifier, which is, if you like, a primary key, CSL, and within that, CSL has this nested dictionary or nested JSON object within it that tells us the ID, the code, etc. The benefit of doing this is that then if I did want to then go and have another item here, I can do that quite easily with other stuff here, right? So what I need to do is I need to try to take all of this stuff and have this, this is the key, and all of this stuff here as the value, and then list all of them one after another. And the way that I would then need to do that is I need to make sure that I have a top level here that would be something like, hey, we're calling in stocks, and all of our stocks is going to be made up of a whole set of objects. CSL is one, Microsoft is another, etc., etc. Right? So then we can stack in here as many as we want. 25 in our case, but it should be as many as you have in your SQLite database. By the end, it should look something that looks a little bit like this. Right? So this is what we're aiming to get to from where we have at the moment with our JSON 2. So with all that, bearing all of that stuff in mind, we're going to go about creating a new Python file here, which is going to be 2JSON3. And we're going to copy and paste all of our 2JSON2 into JSON3. Let's see about how we can go about getting all of our stuff here, all of our stocks. So the first thing we want to do is, whereas we have select star from tracker where code is equal to Microsoft, we're going to ditch the where, because in our case we want to be selecting everything from tracker here, right? So all of the different rows. Whereas we have this cfetch one, this is going to need to be cfetch all, because we want to grab all of our data. Now see that while this seems like a pretty straightforward way to do it, it might not necessarily do exactly what we want. The reason is that you'll see that we have this ID here, and then it gives us all of this stuff within a square bracket. So if you like an array or a list, depending on what you're using. Now this wouldn't be terrible, but in reality what we would rather do is make sure that all of this stuff is a nested JSON object, and in reality we probably don't even really need this part here, the one, because that's just a redundant identifier for now, and we want this to be our key instead. Well, let's think about how we can make this a little bit easier for us. So we're going to group this together, and we're going to add a little bit of commenting here. So we're going to say select stock data here, just so that it's best practice to make sure that we do have some documentation here. Select column headers. Whereas before we have price tuple, well, we're going to call this stock details so that it makes a little bit more sense to us. And we're going to get rid of that print statement because we know that it works. We're just going to let it run for now. So what we are going to be able to do here is, whereas we have a query that is going to pull all of the column names here and all of our headers, well, when we pass this down further, we want to put this into, for now, a list just with this, so that we can get a little bit of, so that we can collect all of our stocks, convert them to JSON, and put them all into a list for now. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to iterate through each stock in our value up here, stock details. So we're going to say for stock in stock details. Well, we want it to get each one of the stock individual items, and we're going to turn that into a dict using the same format as this stuff down here, using this format. And we're going to say headers, and we're going to say stock. And then afterwards, we're going to say stock list dot append stock individual. And we can probably ditch most of the stuff that we have. In fact, we might just, for cleanliness, ditch all of this stuff down here for now. So really simple, simplified here, we have this stock list, and it's going to grab each one of the stock items, put it into a JSON format, and then append it to our stock list. And then we can say print stock list, and we'll see what we get out of this. Oh, so we need to make sure we are running the correct thing. So you'll see, in fact, to make this a little bit easier, I might say for stock in stock list, print stock, and ditch this other line here. So this is just me printing each item from the list on a separate line here. You'll see that now I have ID1, code, AGL, name, all the etc, right? So it looks like it's doing most of what we want. Just note here that it hasn't been dumped into JSON just yet, so we can look at that one shortly. A problem that we do have from this is that it's still taking this ID1, which we don't really want because, again, this is just redundant. This might be handy to have in some instances because CBA, PHP, BHP rather, they might have the same stock ticker in different countries, and so it might be handy to have an ID field. But remember that for our purposes, we want to get it up into this level where we have stocks with AGL as our code, as our key with all the data underneath it as our value. So the way that we can do that is we can actually split our list and our tuple that we have here, right? Possibly two lists. The way that we do that is by, after this headers, we open up square brackets and we say from item 2 onwards, and that's because this is item 1 here, this ID1, and then this, item 0, and then this here is item 1. So we actually want to take all this stuff from here, all right? Then we can do the same with stock, so choose all of that onwards, and we're saying now that, hey, we just want to take all the stuff from name onwards. If I now go right click run, this is our name, and then this is the bit that goes with it there. So the step that we'd be missing here as well is that we are also appending these as dictionaries. There's a whole series of dictionaries. We want to make sure that we are doing our JSON.dumps and dumping this in as a set of JSON data. And now we can go right click run, and you'll see that we've got our double quotation mark here to tell us that this is now coming through as JSON. The last step that we have is to append each one of these to a dictionary instead of a list. So whereas before we had this as stock list, we're going to rename this to stock dict, and we're going to make it a squiggle bracket here so that it knows that, hey, this is going to be a dictionary and not a list. Now this breaks a couple of things. Firstly, we can't append onto a dictionary, and we want to, we'll probably get rid of this print line down here anyway, just to get rid of it. Now, this means we need a dictionary safe function of doing this bit here. Well, the way that we create something in a dictionary is that we name it. So we say stock dict, and we might give it a code here. We'll just give it an arbitrary value for now, and we say, hey, we want it to be stock individual. Now this would work part of the way, and you'll see actually if I go right click run, you'll see that I don't get it exactly right. The reason is, well, partly because I haven't got it printed yet. If I come to here and say print stock dict and go right click run again, you'll see that I only get AGL, and that's because the key here that I'm using is the same, so it overwrites it each time. So this treasury wine estate is the last item here, right? Because it's bolted onto it and it's overriding this AGL code that I use for each in each instance. So instead of using AGL, I need to find a key that I want to use. Quite handily, I actually have that already here and ready to go, because if I call stock 1, well, I should remember then that stock 1 is actually this item here. So it'll be AGL, then Google, then Amazon, etc, etc. So if I now go right click run, this item here, stock 1, will change, and you'll see that I now have my AGL. Beyond AGL, of course, will be all of my other various items here. Now it's a little bit awkward to read, and you might note here as well that I actually also don't have this in JSON format. I've still just got it in a dictionary format. So what I probably want to do is make this just here within my print for now. I can do my JSON dumps and dump this in as so. Now when I hit right click run, you'll see that it's gone and actually recursor in each instance and says, right, here's AGL, here's my name. If I now copy this and dump it into stocks here and go paste and go Control-Alt-L, which is my PyCharm formatting handy tool, you'll see that I now have pretty close to exactly what I want.